الزميلات والزملاء.
Dear colleagues, welcome to you all to this session in the final day of ARIJ 16th forum. Sami Aish is with us to tell us more about the post-release that ARIJ has published this year, released in English and Arabic in order to communicate with the extended family of ARIJ across the Arab countries, from journalists, and partners, publishing partners, and to access and outreach the biggest number of those who are interested in Arab investigative journalism. I'd like to introduce to you my colleague and friend Samia Ayash. Samia is the Director of Communication in ARIJ. ARIJ has joined ARIJ for Director of Communication in 2021. She is an independent journalist, freelance journalist, and specialized in digital media. And she was the director of Google Initiative for News. She was the first teaching fellow in the Middle East. And in CNN in Arabic in Dubai. The floor is yours, Samia. Thank you, Bisan, and thank you all for being with us. I believe this post-release is a very important session to those who are very much concerned to outreach to the audience. And for a simple reason, we all here are very much keen to be there in the social media platforms, Twitter, and everybody, and Facebook, and whether we are fact checkers or we are journalists or so on. So I believe that we place a big burden on social media platforms in terms of our expectations. We expect that social media platforms like a magic stick, that if we were holding, then it would enable us to outreach a bigger audience or a farther audience. In one time, that might have been true, but with big competitiveness, and the extensive contents and intensity of contents, and those who between two brackets we call influencers, and of course those who digital companies and technology companies present themselves as publishing platforms. These expectations are not anymore accurate 100%. Therefore, it's very important for us now to start to look for other platforms that receive the content that we present. And this is where the post the newsletters are being disseminated. The newsletters, they carry a certain content, and they come into our mails after being subscribed to. Many of the news platforms in the Arab world provide this service. We in ARIJ, we tried this experience, and we got some preliminary findings. We wanted to share with you. We tell you more about this experience, about this journey, and the results that we have come up with in this new beginning. So the newsletter of ARIJ, I wish a video was able to be displayed. However, this year, so we've presented the newsletter from ARIJ. It's a weekly release in Arabic. It aims at communicating, direct communication with the staff, with fact checkers, with journalists, to share with them what is it that we do in ARIJ, what do we present in ARIJ. This newsletter, and actually, I wanted them to display these because it took me a lot to work on these. So the news release from ARIJ, that was it was an experiment for us in Arabic. We thought it's a good idea to be presented as well in English, because our community is not only an Arabic speaking language, but we have other partnerships, funders, donors who would like to learn more about what we do and present in ARIJ. Also, in ARIJ, there's another important project, which is AFCN, the Arab Fact Checking Network, whereby we wanted to present a monthly newsletter in Arabic. After we've done all these experiments, we came up with seven lessons that we've learned throughout this journey. To me, it was just a joyful journey. It was like a baby that who we teach, and then we test, and then we then teach again, so that he becomes able to bring the best. And those who know how I train, I like 1, 2, 3, 4 to follow these steps in order to make the best use of them. Just learning points. First of all, it was very important to identify the main goal of this news release. Because there are many things that comes to mind when we come up with a newsletter. We want to increase the visits, that people would know about what do we do. I want people to read more about ARIJ and so on. Such are beautiful goals, wonderful ones, but it would be more wonderful and more useful when we select one thing. So we selected that at the beginning of this of the first phase of this newsletter is to increase awareness, or raise awareness. You always face this issue. Usually, the behavior of users is changed. It's not like it was before. So, using and communicating with the other side is not like they just click and they go to that location. Users now would like to stay on Twitter or Facebook and not leave that platform. So if there's an investigation or there's something that we're posting on any social media platform, it has become difficult to transfer that user from one platform to another. So we decided at the end of the day to focus on one goal, to increase the awareness of one thing. For instance, to enlighten people about ARIJ. And you know why is this? Because the whole idea is not about just to communicate with those who I know, but also to outreach to those who I don't know and who don't know me. So that was a very important goal at the beginning of this journey, and we focus on that goal to raise awareness. A newsletter is not a billboard or a notice board whereby we advertise, put on weekly advertisements or monthly advertisements. It's like a platform whereby we can present our agency in a more humanitarian way. For instance, when me and Saja Murtada work and prepare the monthly release for AFCN, we are always keen to maintain two things. First of all, to show off who is the team who works behind the scenes. Saja, Ahmed, Fatma, Bari, Bara, the core staff of ARIJ. So those names are very important to highlight, because it will not show ARIJ as just as an institution, but as institution that is led by people. Also, it's related to the written content. When we write this release, we start with hello and so on, and we end it with using a name. At the end of the day, it's not like an advertisement billboard or something of the sort. So we are always keen to maintain this humanitarian or human aspect in it, in order to touch the hearts of those who read it, who see it, especially when this is taking, it's like it's been used month after month or week after week. One other very important point that we've learned, and that I would say that not all people do, it's to follow on the numbers. We We post, we produce, we outreach to audience. However, we don't assess how how successful was this, and depending on our skills, how successful or how it unsuccessful it was. Usually in Arabic we just predict. We don't really assess, which will not help us in advancing ourselves. And if something is being done wrong, it will continue to be wrong all through. So the making use of the tools we have with us, statistics tools, and our direct our and so we set an address, and then in another week we draft this address or title in a different way, and this would refer to what might succeed or what might not. So we get to that, or we extract that successful title and we try it on time after another until we come up with a result that we see is best. So my main point is that we need to focus on the experiment. In the old times when we used to work in newspapers and when we used to hear from those who conduct polls or questionnaires, or would someone would tell us by accident about a certain article, we would be able to know how successful they were. But nowadays, we have the tools to assess and directly, immediately. So it's important for us to utilize them. It's not only to utilize them, is to try them and then keep them on the shelf and then adopt that method. It's a sequence of work in a newsroom, especially in communication, contacting and communication has changed. Now there's a production, there's an experience assessment, experience appraisal, experiencing and appraisal, and so on and so on. So the experiment is always there, and assessment is always there. And it does not only refer to the newsletter, but also to how to post on the different platforms, how to distribute news on the different pages and platforms. So it's important for us in the newsletter to focus on different standards. And I've selected three to make sure that we're back in. The first is
the number of open time. We're talking about the email here. We mean how many how many person clicked on the email and opened it. It's not just receiving the email. The email can be received by everyone. But once you click, this means that there is something that attracts the attention, and that's why this person, he was attracted to something, and that's why he clicked. The other thing is the number of clicks. Inside the newsletter, you don't have merely texts, but there are also links that take you to other sites. So it's important to know what is important for the audience or for the viewers. So why did they click? Why did they switch or move to a certain link? Now, we're in a time, and sorry to say that all of us are like that. We're very lazy. We have become very lazy. I don't want my journey to access a certain information to go from one step to step two, step three, etc. No, I want to click and I want the information ready in front of me. However, if I have a user or a number of users who clicked on a certain link, and this is repeated, this means that there's something that attracts them. So I have to keep an open eye on these things that are attractive to the users. The other thing, which is also important, is visits between the mobile and the computer. How many persons open my newsletter via mobile or via computer? I will share a small secret with you. I told you at the beginning that we have our newsletter in Arabic, and there's another one in English. So imagine that the Arab newsletter, the mobile visitors to the Arab newsletter is higher than the English language newsletter. Or maybe comparing this to the computer visitors, it's different. This helps me design the newsletter that we will be addressing in a minute. Such analyses are always important because they provide indicators, and indicators provide hypotheses. In the investigative journalism, we also build hypotheses and we build on them. And through my experience, I would prove if the hypothesis is correct or incorrect. So these three things that you can start with, the, the newsletter tools, there are so many analyses, but it's always to start with these three analytical points. One more thing, one other experience that we have to do, and that I'm always being asked about, is not just newsletters, but many people ask me, what's the best time to post on Instagram or to post on Twitter? Of course, there's no equation here like 1 + 1 = 2. Everybody lives in a certain city or in a certain country or works on a certain content that is different from the other one. So you're addressing or even our audience are different, and that's why we have to keep evaluating our experiences. The newsletter of the AFCN, and we've done 3 or 4 experiences or experiments until we concluded that the last Wednesday of each month at night or in the afternoon is the best time. I would not share with you how we discovered this, but we tried so many days, so many hours, different hours, and this was the best time we could post. Not just this, the tools have improved. They rely a lot on AI, which understands and helps. Of course, after we do the posting or sending many times, the AI helps us tell the best times for posting. So this is a joint process that in many times is shared or between the tool and the person who prepares the newsletter. CTA, I'm sure you're all aware of. The CTA is call to action. If I have a long newsletter and I want to include everything this week, webinar training, certain investigations, read the investigations, or maybe I want to read a certain in-depth report, etc. Whoever enters would really get lost because they have other things to worry about. So they decide to read it and just leave. So they decide to read that investigation and read, even though this way they miss other things. And we have noticed this in more than one newsletter, the notion of selecting go to action. So my newsletter has ads, for example, has activities, but I would focus on read this investigation, or maybe take part in this training, or maybe register in the forums. So if I have only one idea, this would help me access and interact with the audience. Many people would start to speak about the design or the fancy design, the colors, the colorful design, etc. This is important, but I believe in the functional design. The functional design is the design that serves the objective. This is something that we need to focus on, and thus the newsletter should be both colors, and I try to use the colors, the simple ones, and the simple designs also, especially if my audience read my newsletter on mobile, so they don't need for so many colorful things or many information or diverse paragraphs. That's why it's good to separate the paragraphs, the images, the headlines. This is also important. I don't believe in the notion of sending everything to everybody. No, you have to have something called the segmentation, which is the segmentation of the audience. If I know that I want to send people to register on the forum, with the forum, I would send to the journal, investigative journalism, fact checkers, in the Arab countries, for example. So I have a clear audience. I'm able to identify this audience and to reach out to them. Of course, we need to maybe a special session or maybe sessions to talk deeply about this issue about the audience. The other important thing is the continuity. Once you start with the project, you are so enthusiastic, you need to evaluate, you need to assess things, but with the time it becomes a routine. However, if we identify or determine the time, the day, all these necessary factors that would help us send the newsletter on time, this is something that we need to highlight. This is the most important. Continuity is, or sustainability is very important because many, if I, for example, subscribe to a certain newsletter and I know it gets on, I would be waiting for it on a certain date and time. After all that we learned, we achieved some results. When we launched the newsletter in August, we sent 37 to AFCN English and Arabic. The opening started with 36%, and now we're talking about 69% compared to the beginning. Now we're talking about the newsletter. I have not yet addressed leaving the newsletter to ARIJ site, for example, which is another session maybe. We started with clicks, a percentage of clicks on the newsletter 4.7. 4.7% clicks. Now we're talking about 27% that we reached after all these things, all these steps that I talked about. The main two things were the notion of continuity that we continued, and the other thing was the CTA, which is a call to action. This I always have a special call to action in the newsletter I would work on and focus on. Of course, I would have to do some promotions. So for those who would like to or interested to subscribe in this newsletter, please do now. I'm open for Bisan's question. Thank you for this very clear explanation and presentation. It's difficult to come up with questions, but I'm sure the online audience and the present audience here have some questions. I would start with the media outlets, the small and medium media outlets. How much are they benefiting from such newsletters? And and if you have examples to share? Yes, sure. The newsletters, a trend in the West, in the USA and Europe, as opposed to the Arab world. We're still, like beginners. We're still crawling. So in terms of the newsrooms, there might be some very little and few experiments that rely on the billboard. So we have a newsletter. It's rather a collection of news that I send via email. But I would share an example, a personal one that I always like to share to organizations. South in Jordan, South, which means voice. They have an excellent newsletter because many of the things that we talked about apply to this South newsletter, which we saw in the presentation. And because they are very determined in terms of topics. For example, I have a newsletter for every podcast. And so I have an identified or a certain audience. The other one I would like you to see is Thamania, which is a podcast project in Saudi Arabia. They post newsletters and documentaries, films, and this is one of the examples that I believe because they continued and because they determined their topics, and that's why they made a success and a difference in terms of accessibility by the audience. Thank you, Samia. Would you like to start with your questions?
Thank you, Samia. My question is that you talked about the how do you manage this? We are a press release. How can I convince the audience to read it, to join it? Well, convincing the audience. Well, now we'll go back to what I just said at the beginning. It's how to the social media platforms that really irritate our minds sometimes. So I believe now, if we want to use social media platforms to do the cross-posting. So, for instance, I want to promote for my press release through social media because now I'm going to I go to my audience who are there in those platforms, get them from there, outreach them there. And I think over time, with the value of we present in our content, we can that should be attractive. We would convince them, and it's not a magic stick. It doesn't come over time quickly. Like it takes time, and I think like we still have a lot to work on that we should work in order to understand the media, the audience. It's not about only content, but to who are we presenting this content? And this is a very important point, a valid point that all media platforms, medium size or small size, that they should focus on in order to outreach to the audience successfully. Thank you, Samia. Main point in this regard is that these releases will focus on elites and not on regular individuals. And this is something important. Do you in ARIJ, have you or did you work on raising dialogue? Dialogue is one of the important elements when you raise the opportunity for responses to respond to anybody, and they could comment. They could maybe set their opinions. So to have an interactive feature in this press release is very important. Or the news release. So it's better if we really focus on this, that it should be interactive. In addition, to focus on the design. Now, how I saw your designs, they're beautiful, but we need to focus on the content. The more it was significant, the more it was attractive to the audience, the more it will we'll see more visits to those press releases. Okay, to add to what you just said, today there are editors assigned for these news releases. They are recruited by name. They already have their own audience, Twitter or Instagram or any other platform. So as I just said, this news release should have this humane feature. And when we receive a news release from ARIJ, we want to see what did Rawan say, what did Samia say, or any of the staff, and which is something very important. At many times, it should not be a mirror to what's published on the website. News release is a support, but it's not a mirror. It does not reflect what's on the website because otherwise it would be repetitive. It should be something exclusive for that person who receives this email, the news release. We know that in social media, there are many trends that are influencing. What's the trends influence on the newsletter? How can one make use of what's in it, the content? Well, this will take us back to the question that our colleague just asked. Now we're in a phase, and I don't want to say that we will move on from social media to the newsletter. As you just said, the elites issue is still there. But what I'm saying is that there is this content, some of the content that can be segmented and would be presented in platforms that are away from social media. For instance, a certain content that is designed in different ways, because we know that this shape is good to Instagram, the other design is good for Twitter, the other is for the news release. And it's not only about the form or the shape, but also about the content. So we are in this phase where this could be like we're be transforming things. Just we're using and promoting for our news email or release through different ways, maybe word of mouth, and that and people would talk to each other how to make it to a bigger or a wider audience. Also, we don't want to undermine the importance of regular conventional ways. For instance, if Dr. Sahar would come to me and say, like, Arij's bulletin is excellent, and because I trust her, I would maybe subscribe to it, but it might not be really the idea of all or for the bigger audience. In another time, we'll talk about the impact or the influence, and this is where we learn that at times the impact is done through the word of mouth or from person to another more than from social media. And I will conclude in the social media provides you with numbers, but this human impact makes more imprint. Thank you very much. Thank you, Samia. Thank you for being with us. And we hope that our session was a useful one. Thank you very much.